Thank you, Paul. You guys hear me okay? Great, great. So, promise this won't be too math heavy for you guys. I know it's still a little bit early in the morning. But for sure, if anyone has questions on more of the technical aspects, please follow up with us. So Analytic Partners does marketing analytics and measurement. We've been around since 2000. And we were excited about this presentation, or the opportunity to share as Paul mentioned, sort of the twin siblings, if you will, of MMM and MTA, because a lot of what we do is education. And so we have an internal training program, which we also offer to the industry. And these slides that we're sharing today are actually from our internal training that we've done called North Star Academy. There's a lot more details that we can for sure share. So if we start with marketing mix modeling, I'm sure most of the group is familiar with MMM. Really, it started back in the 80s, and it was predominantly focused on packaged goods. And that's really because of the fact that there was strong point of sale data at the time. There was a lot of great data to really understand how marketing was working in that industry. Right now, as you guys probably are aware, MMM is really used across a wide range of industries, and it's really used to understand, measure sales and marketing performance. When marketing mix first started, it was really focused on, like I said earlier, data markets where data was very rich. This has expanded to a lot more emerging markets now. For example, I was just on the phone last night. And we were talking about some of the challenges with Forrester in terms of data in India and Thailand and some of those markets. As I mentioned, it's really used across a wide range of industries now. So it started in CPG, but really many different types of industries, financial services, retail, QSR, pharma, automotive, are really leveraging marketing mix to help with making those decisions. And it's really about helping to inform, through data, business planning and marketing strategy. And really one of the key outcomes is that return on investment from that marketing spend. So, like I said, it's really become the industry standard, particularly in understanding marketing ROI. So for every dollar that I'm spending, how much am I getting back in return? And why? Why is this used? Well, it's a great tool to capture things like external influences. So particularly in emerging markets, for example, where the economy is just growing substantially, we want to be able to account for that. We don't want to overestimate the impact of media when it's really driven by industry trends or consumer dynamics. Complexity. So we know that the industry, we just heard a couple great presentations around that synergy and that dynamic across what consumers are exposed to. It's very complex, and you really need a pretty robust statistical analysis to capture that. Online growth, obviously, particularly as many businesses are omni-channel and moving towards more e-commerce. One of the great things that the richness of data has provided for MMM over the last couple of years is the ability to really use it more real time, to make quicker decisions. That lag time in the past, back in the 80s, could be 12 months, 18 months before you were able to get results. But with a lot of the advances in data access, those insights can be shared much more real time. And really it's about uncovering the why. So it's really enabling not just what is the ROI that I'm getting for my TV, for example, but why am I getting that? Is it my day part? Is it the network mix and so on? So really trying to explain the whys behind the results that we're able to achieve. So what are some of the questions that marketing mix can answer? What are the drivers of my business? How sensitive is my business to competitive activities? What is the ROI? How should I layer? So what's the synergy impact of my marketing? How can I optimize? So if I have a budget, what's the right allocation of spend across my different channels? What are the most efficient digital and social? How does my response compare by commercial or campaign? Which tactics are most scalable? and what is the impact of seasonality? So just some big picture questions that a marketing mix model can address for a business. And what makes it unique is the fact that it's bringing all of these things together in a holistic analysis. So it's really providing that apples to apples comparison against these different marketing and media channels. It also looks at everything in the context of what's happening. So, for example, seasonality might have a positive influence on some of your media. We want to make sure that we're able to capture that within the analysis as well. So it's really kind of that that blend of both the external as well as internal activities that you're looking at. And so how does it work? Again, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of statistical details here, but essentially it's looking at the variability in whatever your KPI might be. It might be subscriptions or sales, website visits. It's looking at that KPI and looking at how all of the potential drivers of a business, so for example, your marketing investment, competitive activity, how that variability over time influences a brand's sales. So you can see here, the black line is our actual sales, and what is predicted based on all of the different things that are happening in the marketplace is that red dotted line. And what's changed a lot, I'd say over the past 5 or so years, is it's really not just about sales as the KPI anymore. There's a lot of sort of direct and indirect effects. So for example, you might look at what is driving search behavior, and then in turn, how is search behavior driving sales? So as I mentioned earlier, it's getting much more complex in terms of understanding that true path to purchase and the ability to really quantify the impact of each of these different media channels. And what this allows us to do is to decompose on a week-by-week, day-by-day basis, depending on the granularity of the data that we're using, the drivers of those sales from an absolute impact over time. So you can see the impact on a week-by-week basis in this example from things like promotions in gray, non-marketing activity in the light red there. And really this provides, like I said, an absolute impact of all of the potential drivers over a time period. So shifting gears a little bit, multi-touch attribution. So multi-touch attribution, much newer, right, than MMM. Probably 10, 12 years or so. So what is MTA? MTA is really about assigning credit to different advertising exposures that typically a person or a household is exposed to. So this example, we can see display ad, then I searched, then I received an email, and then I made a purchase. So really what we're trying to solve for here is, of these exposures, what actually drove that transaction? And there's lots of different approaches to MTA. So in the past, last click was used very frequently, which essentially gives 100% of that transaction credit to the last thing that a user was clicked on. Very easy. It's just a click and it tagged your website and you're able to quantify that impact. There's also first click. So again, very simple. The first ad that you're clicking on gets 100% of the credit. Equal, so evenly distributed across all of those different drivers. So everything gets similar credit. And then U-shaped, which provides essentially more credit to both that first and last click, and middle or medium credit to those in the middle. What we do and what really is best in class in the industry is an algorithmic approach. So no predetermined assumption around how much credit each touch point receives, but really through a mathematical model, we're able to understand of those different exposures, how each of them contributed to that actual conversion. So we talked about marketing mix, we talked about MTA. They're both not perfect, right? So they each have their strengths and their weaknesses. So if we talk about the strengths first for marketing mix, it's holistic. It can capture everything in a holistic analysis. It can really capture that incremental impact. So taking into account that there's going to be folks that are going to make a purchase of your brand regardless. It helps with business forecasting, and that's an important one to call out because it is capturing everything that can really drive performance for our brand. You're able to use those insights to forecast what you might expect in the future. MTA is great because you get down to that person level. You really understand individuals or that customer level view. You're able to create audiences. You're able to improve your targeting. Granular results, because of the vast number of data points within MTA, you can get really, really deep in understanding dynamic creatives, for example, which messages are working best based on your different target audiences and so on. And it also enables that real-time tactical planning. So those insights can be developed right away, fed into DSPs and so on to really help with activation. Now with that, they both have weaknesses. So there's lack of customer level insights within the marketing mix. You can get to segments or personas maybe, but getting down to that individual is just not part of marketing mix because not everything is available at an addressable level. Granularity, so how deep you can go with marketing mix is really limited by the number of data points available. And then data lags impact time to results. So while it has become faster, it's still not going to be as fast as getting your digital data in on a minute-by-minute basis to be able to run MTA. MTA is limited really by the fact that you're not able to get everything down to that individual. You'd have to make assumptions around whether or not I was at a sponsorship event or I was impacted by seasonality or operational factors for a retailer. There's also selection bias and really that inability to get real insight into incrementality of advertising exposure. And then incomplete business coverage. So didn't want to put walled gardens on this slide because I feel like we talk about walled gardens way too much. But you know that it's the reality of where we are, and it's only going to get worse. So there's always going to be challenges with getting that complete coverage of everything that individuals can be exposed to. So with that, you know, what do you do, right? You should you use both? Should you use one over the other? And really, you know, there's a lot of different, techniques here, and really where the industry has gone to, and what we strongly believe in, is this last one here, which is called Unified Marketing Impact Analysis, or a Unified Measurement Approach. And that approach really blends the benefits of both the marketing mix as well as the MTA into a cohesive analysis. So you really benefit from the strengths of each of those specific analyses. So I'll talk a little bit about unified. So it's really about kind of that strategic lens. So if you think about marketing mix, it's really a strategic approach, right? What am I getting back for each of my different marketing channels? How can I prove that over time? If I have a particular goal that I'm looking to achieve, what's the right shift of investment that I need to do? From a tactical perspective, that's really where the MTA comes in. And Unified really brings these together from both a strategic and tactical view, as well as a customer and business view for one version of the truth. So going a little bit deeper there, so we have, again, the marketing mix, which is that full business view. You can see all the potential drivers of a business: social, online media, operational factors, external factors that are non-controllable. MTA, again, you have those different touch points that individuals are exposed to. You can then link that through things like your DMP or your first-party data, and then you connect them for a unified measurement approach. And to bring that to life in terms of what that means and how you would get results by bringing these two together, if we look on the top left here, we have results from a multi-touch attribution analysis. And this is a very simplistic example. We have two campaigns. We had different placements of advertising. Across those campaigns, we see MSN highlighted in the yellow area there. Their response, so what's their probability, what is a user's probability to convert based on exposure to these different ads on these different sites. We can see Huffington Post for campaign 1, very, very strong. The challenge with that, that's just in the context of what we can measure in an addressable world. We then have the aggregate marketing mix. And the beauty of that is across these two campaigns, we can understand the incrementality. So we can look at, for example, how much of our display ads are actually driving absolute sales from those campaigns. And you can see campaign 2 was actually getting much more sales from those display ads. Offline was contributing a little bit less, and so on. But the great thing is you're able to look at that in the context of everything that is happening in the marketplace at that time. And so what a unified approach does is it brings the two of them together so you have aggregated results. So you can actually start to compare things like MSN, Fox News, and Huffington Post, so very granular placement digital insights, with offline TV, for example. So in this example, we can see MSN in campaign, it looks like campaign 2, less responsive, right, versus campaign 1. But given the incrementality of display during that time frame, it was actually a stronger ROI than we had in campaign 1. And you can actually compare that then to your offline media. So things like TV, we actually saw a pretty similar return on investment across display on Huffington Post, or on MSN rather, and offline TV in that example. So really to summarize the benefits of this unified approach. So we looked at the strengths and the weaknesses of MMM and MTA. We don't recommend doing them in isolation. We recommend doing them together through a unified measurement analysis. What this provides is that breadth from that holistic marketing mix to understand both addressable, non-addressable, external factors, all sales channels and key accounts, making sure that we're able to account for walled gardens, which we can't necessarily get at a user level, incrementality of these activities in the context of everything that's happening, and really most importantly is that ability to have holistic planning and optimization. That, coupled with the depth of analysis that we get from the MTA, really understanding that path to purchase and synergies, insights at a very granular individual person level, in-depth analysis of placement, frequency, creative size, really the benefits that we typically see with MTA is around targeting and understanding different audiences, and that really enables that tactical planning and optimization. So that's it.
Very good. Thanks, Maggie. So I'm going to start off with the $64,000 question, which I'm sure is on everybody's mind. So exactly how do you connect when you're building this unified database? To give an example, is it a single equation where you've got market mix model, regression kind of stuff going on this side, and then on the other side you have something else for MTA, or are you doing two analyses separately and then with kind of people putting it together?
Yeah, it's a great question, and if we had probably another hour, we could get into all the technical details. I think there's a lot of different ways out there in the marketplace that folks are doing this. Our approach is to essentially build two separate models, mostly because they're just very different answers or questions that you're trying to address with the two, and the level of granularity across a holistic marketing mix and an MTA, it's really not possible to do it in one single equation. So to keep it very simple, what we do, and I'll actually go back a few slides to help explain it. So if we start on let's just look at campaign 2, for example. What we're able to do, we start with the marketing mix, and because the marketing mix is holistic, so it includes all the walled gardens, it includes external activity, it includes everything ideally that can impact business performance. So we'll be able to understand in the context of everything, how much are we getting from our display ads? So that 4.1 there on campaign 2. We then go to our MTA. Now the MTA is not going to have everything in it. There's going to be challenges with getting data from any exposures on YouTube, for example, and so on. So we have to take that with a grain of salt when we're doing the MTA. But what the MTA does provide us with is the relative responsiveness, or how effective each of these individual exposures are on that path to transaction. So what we're able to get is that relative impact. And so what we do to combine the two is we take the relative impact of what we get from the MTA, we combine that through an algorithm that we've developed with the incrementality from the marketing mix to get to these results down here on the bottom. So for example, the relative response in campaign 2, that same pattern more or less follows the integrated ROI results that we see when we combine that with the marketing mix.
Great, thanks. Questions?
Thanks. Hi, Maggie. I was wondering about the how you're incorporating the newly available television ad exposure data, even if it's not addressable, but the, kind of the linear ad exposure data that you can get from MVPDs or from smart TVs, how you're incorporating that into your models.
Yeah, so we'll work with matching, like LiveRamp, for example, to try to match that data where we can at an individual or household level to bring that TV exposure within the multi-touch attribution. Again, it's still not going to be everything, but it does provide much more granular insight in terms of understanding that path to purchase and where TV sort of falls in that conversion funnel, if you will. So we are trying to bring it into that user level.
So it would be a third model, and then you incorporate the digital, the television into the...
No, we'd bring it into the MTA if we're able to get it at that same level. So TV would just be another. Exactly, yeah.
George?
Yeah, just a quick question. In recent weeks, you mentioned walled gardens in your presentation. Google made an announcement that they're not going to be working with external vendors anymore in terms of the attribution and linkage space, and that you had to do all that work within their ads data hub environment. How does that impact your presentation and what you just laid out? Because Google's just south of maybe half of all the ads served on the internet.
Yeah, it could basically end attribution as it exists today. We have a lot of clients that do not want their activity, their sales, their information behind Google's firewalls to do MTA. So that's one option. I'm not exactly sure how limiting Google is going to be. I know they're not going to be sharing their DoubleClick ID outside of the Google ecosystem any longer. Whether or not we'll be able to incorporate our own tags onto that or third-party tags that they will accept, that's one thing we're exploring with them. But we have pretty much every week we're on the phone with Google and Facebook to really understand what's happening, because to your point, it's changing on a week-by-week basis.
I've read where there's a certification process that you can go through with Google to reinstate that. Are you guys pursuing that?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Good. Any last questions? In the back corner, please.
Before we had access to user level like smart TV data, was there a way to track TV exposure like without the smart TV data?
At an individual or a user level?
Yeah.
I think someone else might be better to answer this, but I think the only way to potentially do that was through different panels that, like a Nielsen or one of those folks would set up.
Hi, how are you? This question about MMMs in general. So the more I work with MMMs, the more I understand that there's obviously a science component, but there's also a art component. So when putting together the analysis, depending on the analytics people that actually work on this, there could be a lot of variation. How do you mitigate that variable in terms of who's actually working on the project and the analytics going into it?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that quickly. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of training. So all of our team members go through 2-week boot camp, and then we have ongoing training. So everybody's trained across all of our offices on the methodology and both that art and that science piece. The other thing we benefit from is because we've been doing this for almost 20 years now, we have what we call the ROI genome. And the ROI genome has a bunch of benchmarks in terms of return on investment, but it also has a lot of benchmarks from a modeling perspective as well. So as we're modeling, we'll start to see things like, all right, the contribution of TV is X for this industry. How does this compare to other businesses that we've analyzed over our 18 years and so on? So we have that perspective kind of within our modeling platform that provides just perspective. It doesn't mean that it's right, but that experience is kind of built into what we do. And we've done a lot of bridging, for example, where we're started to work with clients that had worked with other vendors in the space. And really depends on the different vendors. But I think as long as if the methodology is relatively similar in terms of an econometric model, you're looking at the variability over time, we tend to see fairly consistent results where you might not have made meaningful differences in terms of business decisions. There have been cases where we have, and then we have to go back and try and triangulate the whys between them. So we feel good about the consistency within our team. It's when we start to try to bridge with others that it's harder because we don't necessarily know what went behind it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Maggie. Let's have a hand for Maggie.